Well, good morning, everybody. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Good morning, members. If you could please make your selections on your tablet. Still have a couple of members that have not voted yet. Maybe one more member that has not entered their vote. Chair, we have a quorum with 10 members present and 5 members absent.
Very good. Thank you. Just a quick housekeeping note for the board members. On your screens in front of you, the presentations will not be showing up this morning. There's a glitch in the system that'll get worked out. But if you do want to look at the documents associated with any item as we go along this morning, just click on the Documents tab in the upper left of your screen. And on the left, you will see the various numbers associated with the agenda items. If you click on any of those numbers associated with the agenda item, the associated documents for that item will come up. So hopefully that'll give you what you need. Of course, the presentations will still be on the screens in front of us, but if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask and we'll make sure you have the documents that you need. All right, well, let's begin with non-agenda public comment. This provides 2 minutes for anybody who would like to comment on something that is not on today's agenda, but is within the purview of MTS. Clerk, do we have any non-agenda public comment?
Yes, we do. Sylvia Adame, if you could please make your way to the podium.
Panel, good morning. Mr. John McCain, he knows me very well, and Fernandez. We live in Chula Vista. We lost our daughters to fentanyl overdose. Jeanette lost her daughter on MTS trolley station in the parking lot, where she laid there for 5 hours and nobody noticed her. Not security, nobody. We have the video, and we're thankful for the video that was sent to us from MTS of her passing. We were able to have security guard trained, and now they carry Narcan as they did in the past. And Mr. John McCain, thank you. I did go and request for that to the mayor meeting, and it did happen. Thank you for that. But we need more. There's a lot of people that are dying out there, and most of them use a trolley. We're not saying not to let them in, but we need your security guards to be very well trained. From what I'm understanding is that it's up to them if they want to perform CPR. It's up to their discretion if they want to perform that. It should be mandated because people are dying out there. My daughter died within the 5-mile radius of the trolley station in September. Jalen passed away in January. Those were our children. It wasn't an object. It wasn't a bicycle. It wasn't something that was taken from us like a stolen item. We lost a child. We're not blaming anybody for their choices that they made, but this is public safety. Security is supposed to be helping as well. Walk the parking lots. She laid there for 5 hours and nobody noticed her.
Your time has expired. William Perno, if you can please make your way to the podium.
Good morning, board members. My name is William Perno. I'm a senior prevention specialist with SAY San Diego. Much of my work involves training the community regarding the risks from fentanyl and opioids, how to recognize an opioid overdose, and how to use Narcan or naloxone to try and reverse the opioid overdose. This work is funded by the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency, Behavioral Health Services, and in partnership with the San Diego Harm Reduction Coalition. I would like to thank Tim Curran and Dan Rislin with MTS for their efforts to have approximately 200 intercon security guards under contract with MTS, trained and equipped with Narcan nasal spray. Narcan naloxone saves lives, and the sooner it can be used on a person suffering from an opioid overdose, the better. While emergency medical services will arrive as soon as possible, those first few minutes of care before EMS arrives are very important. A security guard may be the first person to observe an overdose. Naloxone is easy to use, and a person can be trained in just 11 minutes. CPR is also a critical skill to know and utilize, as opioids kill by slowing and stopping a person's breathing. I would like to note there are other government agencies that have private security guard companies under contract to provide security at local government buildings open to the public within the County of San Diego and incorporated cities. It would be wonderful if these private security guard companies, including Intercon, under additional government contracts, ensure their employees are CPR trained and equipped with naloxone nasal spray. I hope these security guard companies will take these minimal steps voluntarily and upon request of the appropriate local government agency. These conditions could also be added to existing contracts when the contracts are open for modifications or renewal. I hope Intercon Security will lead the way and encourage other security guard companies in San Diego County to follow. Say San Diego can provide the naloxone training and equip security guards with naloxone nasal spray at no cost. We can provide this training anywhere within the County of San Diego. I've left a Did You Know handout regarding fentanyl in my contact information. I hope other local governments will follow the lead of MTS.
Your time has expired. Alex Wong, you can please unmute yourself.
MTS's top priority ought to be planning for 5-minute frequencies on the Mid-Coast and Green Lines each. It may not be possible immediately because of budget and personnel shortfalls, but that should not stop MTS from planning for 5-minute frequencies. It should continue to aggressively seek new sources of operations revenue. It must also allocate funding for a new trolley yard to store the additional vehicles necessary to run 5-minute frequencies. What MTS cannot do is give up on planning for 5-minute frequencies just because MTS is broke now. MTS will not be broke forever, and trolley ridership will continue to skyrocket as it has during the past few years. That's why the airport trolley proposal, which could permanently cap Mid-Coast and Green Line frequencies to 10 minutes each, is deeply concerning. 10-minute frequencies would be woefully inadequate. Mid-Coast ridership has grown so fast that the only thing stopping MTS from increasing Mid-Coast frequencies to 7.5 minutes this month was uncertain state funding. And that's before University City approved a plan update to add nearly 50,000 new residents and 72,000 new jobs near the Mid-Coast trolley. So please, I urge MTS to really think twice about supporting the airport trolley and to really think about and prioritize 5-minute frequencies, or at least as much as possible, the highest amount of frequencies as possible on the Mid-Coast and Green Lines. Thank you.
That concludes public comments, Chair.
Thank you very much, Clerk. Thank you to all those who provided public comment this morning. Let's move on to our consent items. The consent agenda includes items 3 through 23. Director Leyva Gonzalez is going to need to recuse on item 23. So I'm going to pull item number 23 so that we can vote on that separately after he steps out. But while he's here, let's go ahead and consider items 3 through 22. Clerk, is there any public comment on consent items 3 through 22?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay. Given that, is there a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved.
Motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Director McCann.
Second.
We have a second from Vice Chair Goebel. Any other discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Clerk, please go ahead and take the vote on the consent items.
Members, if you can please make your selection on the tablets. Chair, the vote passes with 11 members voting yes.
Okay, thank you very much. We will let Director Leyva Gonzalez step out. Don't go far. I don't think this will take very long. Clerk, is there any public comment on consent item number 23?
No public comments, Chair.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve consent item number 23?
So moved.
Okay. All right. We have a motion from Vice Chair Goebel. We have a second from Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Steppe. Any further discussion on consent item number 23? Seeing none, clerk, please call the vote on consent item 23.
Members, please make your selections on the tablet. The motion passes with 10 members voting yes and 1 member recused himself.
Yes, very good. Thank you. And for the record, that was Director Matt Leyva Gonzalez recusing on item number 23. We will invite him back into the room, and here he comes. And with that, we'll move to item number 24. And that is an informational item on the semi-annual uniform report of disadvantaged business enterprise awards and payments. Samantha Leslie Meyer is going to present this item. Please feel free to begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Thank you. As mentioned, my name is Samantha Leslie, and I'll be presenting on the semi-annual uniform report of DBE awards and payments. In March of this year, if you recall, I did provide a presentation on the DBE program, kind of outlining in more detail what our program entails. So I'll just kind of briefly go over it as background before I get into the semi-annual report. So as a FTA grant recipient, MTS must comply with certain DBE regulations. One of those requirements is to develop a DBE program, which outlines how we're going to comply with the DBE regulations, and that can be found in MTS Board Policy 26. We have a race-neutral, gender-neutral program. We do not use any contract-specific goals. We try to achieve our DBE participation and participation from other certified firms through our various outreach measures. We are also required to develop a triennial overall DBE goal, looking at what our anticipated federal funded contract awards will be, what type of work areas those are, and how many DBEs perform that work in our geographic market area. Looking at our past achievement, we come up with a goal, and our current goal for this current triennial period is 5.6%. So that means our goal of all our third-party contracts that are federally funded, we aim to award 5.6% to a DBE prime or DBE sub. We can only count DBE certified firms towards achievement of our goal, but again, we still conduct outreach to all the various certified firms and track these dollars on both our federally funded contracts and locally funded contracts. And the FTA wants to make sure that we're keeping track of how we're doing towards our goal. So we have to track it semi-annually and annually. So this is the first semi-annual period for our new triennial. So this period is for October 1st, 2024 to March 31st, 2025. And for FTA funded contracts awarded, which is the primary focus for the FTA, this is where they really look at whether or not we have a shortfall. We significantly achieved our DBE goal. Our goal again is 5.6%, and we achieved 65%. This is primarily due to awarding a very large 5-year contract to Carlos Guzman. They're a DBE prime, and they do our body repair of our trolleys whenever it gets into an accident. So of the federal dollars on that contract, 23 million federal dollars went to a DBE prime. To note on this is when we did our triennial overall goal, we anticipated awarding this contract, but at the time, there actually was no DBEs that did this work. Carlos Guzman was not a certified DBE with this NICS code. But working with him in the last year, his firm, and learning how to add NICS codes to your own DBE profile, Carlos Guzman did receive this work code, was confirmed to be a small business in this work code of support activities of rail transportation. And so that is why we did end up getting to award this to a DBE. For contracts open, we achieved 3.63% DBE achievement. This was largely due to ongoing payments to NMS Management, a DBE prime that we use for various janitorial services here in the building. in our buildings and in some trolleys as well. I anticipate this number will be increased in the next reporting period because of ongoing payments to Carlos Guzman DBE. And for contracts completed, it really just varies on what contracts we complete in any given period. Every contract kind of varies in the longevity. Is it a short, long, depends on our business needs. But in this period, we just didn't award any large DBE federally funded contracts. So we only had 0.41%. In the last meeting, we received feedback to kind of see if we can do a little bit more in technical assistance. So I have some good news that in the last month, our staff has been working hard to develop and host our own virtual outreach event to DBEs and small businesses on July 9th. It'll be from 8:30 to 1:45 p.m. All vendors are invited to attend, no pre-registration necessary. We're going to have various topics throughout the day, and vendors can come in and out of the virtual meeting depending on which topic sounds most interesting to them and their availability. We are going to definitely include technical assistance, explaining our DBE program, explaining how to do business with us, what kind of procurements there are, how does the bid packages work. We're going to be talking about our upcoming procurements, capital projects and non-capital projects that are up and coming, information on how to become registered on Planet Bids so they can learn about everything about the procurement, and information on how to apply and become a certified DBE and the benefits of doing so. And it won't just be MTS staff. We've got a lot of our partners to present at this one. We have Caltrans, California Department of General Services, California Supplier Clearinghouse, and Planet Bids, who is our current e-procurement vendor. And we've tried to do a lot of outreach on this outreach event. We've emailed all of our bidders on our Planet Bids website. We've asked all of our partners and public agencies to send this event to their bidders list. We have this on our website and on the California Department of General Services. This event is on their website. We've also emailed our various small business organizations and trade organizations we work with, usually when we develop our DBE overall goal. And if anyone here at the board would like to share this information to their constituents on their various social media platforms, we'd be happy to send them information on how to do that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or comments.
Very good, thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments.
All right, this is an informational item. No motion is necessary. We will open board discussion on this item if there is any board discussion. Seeing none, we will thank you very much again for the presentation after we go to Chair Pro Tem Monica Montgomery-Stein.
I will just be quick. I did want to say thank you for the presentation and for bringing it to the board kind of outside of the consent agenda so that we can look at what is actually going on, and also just breaking down the reason for the higher numbers of DB this year. I know that fluctuates, but I appreciate the work and the outreach on July 9th. Of course, we know it does take follow-up, and there's issues around building capacity and capital, for DBEs, for disabled veteran enterprises, for all of the above. But I just want to say I appreciate all of the work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem. All right, seeing no further discussion, again, thank you for the presentation, and we'll move to item number 25. That is an informational item on the transit operations insourcing feasibility study. I will invite our presenters to introduce themselves once they get set up, and feel free to begin whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm Mike Wygant, the Chief Operating Officer for Transit Operations here at MTS. I'm joined to my right by Mike Daney. He's our Director of Contracted Operations. And to his right, we have James Durkin and Russ Chisholm from TMD. So a little history. In 2024, the board directed staff to look at the possibility of what we call insourcing, or bringing our currently contracted fixed route operations, which is about half of the totality of what we operate on fixed route through Transdev, our partners, and our paratransit to an in-house operation. In other words, migrate them to MTS employees were operating that portion of our service. And so in July of last year, we brought to the board with your approval a contract with TMD to really do what we call a feasibility study, to analyze the possibility of that, what steps would be necessary, what the advantages, what the disadvantages, what the cost impacts, what the customer advantages would be. And so they've been working very diligently. It's an 18-month process. They've already given a couple of reports. It's been broken down into 4 different phases or 4 tasks. They're about halfway or just reached the halfway point of that. They gave an update, I believe, in March on task 1. And so they're here today to provide an update on all the work that they've done so far and what findings they found and get your input back on it. So I'm going to turn it over to James.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you. As Mr. Wiegand indicated, I am James Gerken with Transportation Management Design, or TMD, San Diego County-based transit planning and consulting firm, joined here by my colleague, Russ Chisholm. I'm going to give a bit of a quick recap and overview of this project, and then share with you some of our findings and information related to the second task of the project. As Mr. Wiegand indicated, this is an 18-month study to help MTS understand the feasibility of insourcing contract transit operations and the impact MTS, its employees, and riders in the community. We've recently completed the second task of the project, which includes a concept plan or information about the challenges, opportunities, and advantages associated with each of the scenarios being considered in the study, with the impacts organized by the different departments and functions on the bus side of it and administrative side of MTS. Study began in the late summer of last year and will be continuing through very beginning of next year. And just to show you a schedule here of where we are in our touch point here with you today. The insourcing feasibility study is considering 4 scenarios. The insourcing of all contract operations, including fixed route bus service operated in El Cajon and Chula Vista, as well as the paratransit and minibus service operated out of the Copley Park Division in Kearny Mesa. A second scenario considering only the insourcing of fixed route bus and minibus service, and a third scenario considering solely the insourcing of the paratransit operations, and comparing that to the current baseline of the contract services separation from in-house transit service. To set the stage ahead of the information related to task 2, Mr. Wiegand indicated it's a bit more than half of the fixed route bus service is currently operated by Transdev, with 287 bus pullouters compared to 205 on weekdays for MTS. There's a clear objective to deliver one MTS service for the customer, uniform and reliable across both in-house and contracted services. And the metrics reported to the board for FY24 in the annual report show similar, but some difference in the performance. And while MTS is shown in the bottom of the table here, it does pay more per unit of service than for the transit service. There is a moderate outperformance as it relates to some of the accidents, mean distance between failures with the revenue equipment, and complaints per 100,000 passengers. So while both services are delivered efficiently and effectively, there is a difference related to some of the metrics shown here. The operational administrative concept plan, the work began in January of this year with the draft report initially submitted to MTS in May and finalized this month. The report includes development of department level concepts for each of the scenarios. This includes staffing impacts, labor relations considerations, and impacts across HR and training, assets, procurement, legal and risk management, finance, et cetera. And important to note that the cost projections and specific implementation and scheduling related pieces of the work will be completed in later tasks. So initially talking about staffing and some of the related issues there beyond moving some of the department level concerns, the project team's initial projections for full insourcing indicated that bringing the service in-house will require a substantial increase to the budgeted FTEs or full-time equivalent positions at MTS, ranging from at the low end around 260 additional full-time employees for insourcing of solely paratransit, and as high as over 1,400 additional employees to the MTS budgeted positions for full insourcing as compared to just under 1,750 in the approved FY26 budget. So this projected increase of 1,433 positions would represent an 82% increase to the number of budget positions at MTS. The chart here shows at the top bar the existing MTS FY26 budget with that black outline indicating the actual current incumbents at the various positions at the TransDev divisions. So you can see the comparison here, the increase in scenario 1 of all insourcing, and then the remaining TransDev staff in black in the third and fourth bar, where you wouldn't be insourcing all of the service in those two scenarios. So along with the substantial increase to the number of budget positions, there are certainly cost considerations. It's important to note that most classifications and job titles at TransDev are paid less than their MTS counterparts. Shown here are a few examples with bus operators, mechanics, and the bus servicers position, the differences between MTS and the various TransDev divisions. And along with the wages, health and retirement benefits are also anticipated to be a large driver of the expected cost differences between the in-house and contracted services should they be insourced. Along with the cost considerations, there are also important labor and representation issues to consider. So with the bargaining units, these will bring notable and complex challenges for MTS. MTS currently has two union locals and 2 bargaining units representing the represented staff. On the TransDev side, there are 3 union locals with 8 bargaining units here. The chart here showing with the organization or the division with TransDev in the text, the color is positioned and they're nested under the various union locals representing those job classifications at the different geographies. With insourcing, MTS would be presented with 2 options that are available as related to bargaining units and labor representation. And these would ultimately dictate the number of CBAs or collective bargaining agreements that MTS will need to negotiate on a regular basis. The first option being bringing the TransDev insourced employees into the existing MTS bargaining units. And the second option would be bringing over the current TransDev bargaining unit structure over to MTS. The table at the bottom there indicates the numbering bargaining units you would have under those different scenarios. With option 1, there could be an opportunity or a potential need for a third unit as indicated in the first footnote there, where the road supervisor's title is not represented at MTS, but is at TransDev. And then secondly, also with the insourcing of minibus service separate from paratransit, that would introduce some representation considerations as well that could affect the number of bargaining units that may need to be negotiated by MTS. From here, we'll be moving into just kind of an overview of some of the department level considerations related to the insourcing concept plan. With the HR and training side, there will be a need to ensure that insourced employees meet all MTS qualifications and potentially assess the need for refresher training or any additional training when they would come aboard as MTS employees. And any new employee training at the insourced divisions would need to follow MTS's existing programs. On the fixed route bus operator side, you need to decentralize the route training. A new bus operator hires an MTS or train across all of the in-house operated routes out of IAD or KMD. Given the wide geography of the MTS service area and the introduction of new divisions, quite a lot of service, around half of it, that route training aspect of their training would need to be decentralized. On the paratransit side, we need to establish a new MTS training curriculum and program for paratransit because all current paratransit operators and other associated staff for paratransit operations are not MTS employees currently. And on the maintenance side, you need to work with the San Diego Community College District to expand the MTS apprenticeship program for these insourced divisions. With capital assets and procurement, it's important to note that MTS already owns the bus divisions and the physical plants there, the revenue fleet, and other major assets needed for today's transit operations. TransDev owns the tires, bus parts, and non-revenue vehicles, other minor equipment, and MTS will need to acquire, transfer, or lease those materials and supplies at each of the insourced divisions. With the tires example, MTS currently leases tires for the revenue vehicles with a vendor. TransDev purchases their tires with a member on staff to handle the management and changing those tires. There's a difference there, and sorting out some of those issues on the procurement side will be a key consideration. Additionally, MTS will also need to assume all procurement for the insourced division with additional staffing. Expanded storeroom operations will be necessary with additional parts and staffing, and there's an additional cost there for MTS to carry that additional parts inventory for more bus divisions. On the legal and risk management side, more than doubling the volume of directly operated fixed route service and adding paratransit would significantly increase MTS's risk exposure for liability claims. This will result in additional likely third-party liability claims, worker compensation claims. There'll be additional staffing need to manage that, as well as increased insurance premiums. And MTS will also need to expand the volume of its self-insured retention and likely purchase additional commercial liability coverage for delivering more service. On the finance and accounting and technology side, finance and accounting will need to assume a much larger role with expanded operations. Additional payroll and accounting staff would be required with a significant increase to the number of employees employed directly by MTS. And on the technology side, while MTS currently owns the contracts or licenses for the majority of the software and technology used by Transdev, MTS would need to acquire the physical computer hardware and other IT infrastructure at the divisions, whether from Transdev or purchasing new. You'd also need to acquire the specific software for operations and dispatching of paratransit, with transferring the license from the Transdev contract or purchasing it separately. And then on the operations and maintenance side, you need to be the transition at the divisions for operations staff to migrate from Transdev's VDS software they use to the HASIS daily software used by MTS. And then on the maintenance side for the work and parts management and everything associated with daily maintenance operations, transferring from Transdev's Ron Turley Associates RTA software to the SAP business platform used by MTS. And then on the operations side, need to ensure that all of the fixed route divisions that will be insourced follow MTS policies and procedures. And this includes dispatching, extra management, the pull in and pull out of buses, and field supervision communications. We need to ensure that the dispatch matches MTS coverage ratios, radio dispatch consolidated to cover the entire system, and ensure that the deployment and management of the field supervision follows MTS policies and contends with the expanded geography with the insourced operations. And then
Could
also,
you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Just ensuring that, as examples, the dispatching, export management, field supervision in particular, ensuring that there's the adequate coverage geographically and staffing for the increased volume of service. And then with MTS needing to stand up a new in-house paratransit division, ensuring that the operating procedures in place for that, given the differences in the clientele and the type of service from fixed route bus. And then with just in general the staffing levels, ensuring that they're adequate levels at each of the insourced divisions. Similarly, on the maintenance side, transitioning the software used for daily maintenance practices, moving to a greater reliance on in-house body work rather than more of the outsourced work that Transdev does at its divisions, and then switching to the MTS tire leasing scheme as opposed to the purchase of the tires that Transdev does. And then ensuring, the mechanic servicers and storeroom clerk staffing levels follow MTS resourcing coverage ratios as part of the projected budgeted positions analysis we conducted for this that we presented earlier. There's a clear difference in the staffing ratios at the Transdev divisions versus MTS for maintenance. There's a greater number of employees per volume of work on the maintenance side at MTS, and ensuring that these insourced divisions match those MTS policies and procedures as it relates to maintenance. So we're here last fall to present an overview of the project. We returned in March of this year to provide our findings from task 1 of the existing conditions report, and we're here this morning with you to present the task 2 work. We'll continue to provide updates to the board and seek input as we move through the remainder of the project. Our next touch point plan for September, where we'll provide more details on cost and implementation strategies, and then a final briefing at the conclusion of the project in January of next year. So where do we go from here? We'll be moving forward with development of cost implementation strategies, moving into the next task. And as I mentioned, a board update planned for September of this year with additional details. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
I'm sorry, you said we have no.
We have no public
Okay.
comments. Sorry
Thank you.
about that.
All right, well then let's move to board discussion on this item. This is an informational item. We will begin our conversation with Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for a good presentation for phase two. My question is, you mentioned there would require additions to finance and accounting staff and et cetera, et cetera. Would any of these additions require MTS to purchase additional land or office space that we don't already own?
Yeah, good. Mike Wygant, Chief Operating Officer. Good question. I think absolutely as it comes to the administrative staff to support them. So this building, for instance, the extra procurement department to purchase, double the amount of parts to support our bus and paratransit operations, potentially your legal staff, increasing your claims with HR, the responsibility to not only hire on board, but continue to deal with the turnover with more than doubling your bus operations side would result in more staff. And I would have to do kind of a detailed analysis of our floor plans, but we would have to either really squeeze in or find some more available footprint.
Does Transdev store any buses on property that's not controlled by MTS?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Any further discussion on this item? Director Fleming.
Thank you. As you guys are analyzing this, have you looked farther up the org chart within MTS to see what other impacts this would make? To me, from a business perspective, when you add over 50% volume or over double the current volume into the organization, I can certainly see the need for additional staff to support that and so on and so forth. But then I start thinking farther up the ladder into the management structure as well. Is that being looked at?
Yes, absolutely. Great question. As we talked about the legal and the procurement and the HR, and those are some examples of where we would have increases. But yes, we would have some efficiencies. Right now, we have a pretty robust oversight team responsible for the day-to-day oversight of the contractors, not only to ensure legal compliance, but contractual compliance and just the best overall service that we can provide for our customers. There would be some efficiencies as we absorb that. They already have those roles, so we wouldn't need an oversight of a directly operated service. So there would be some modifications, and some of that was considered in that analysis of the body counts, I guess you would say.
Thank you, Director Fleming. Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Steppe.
Just real quick, thank you for this second part of the presentation. I'll be making many more comments as we get to cost and implementation impacts. But I just kind of want to level set on how we got here, which is we experienced a strike, right? And so when we talk about risk, I would really like to have the risk that we already experienced as an agency be a part of the analysis, just so that we can have that to compare to when we make our final decision. Our riders were not able to get to work. Our drivers and our workers were, striking, and we also had to come in and open up the contract in order to relieve our workers via Transdev, right? And so that was a huge deal for us. And I think when we talk about risk, we need to add like what this agency has already been through and how moving these functions in-house could potentially mitigate that type of risk. So I'd just like that to be a part of the analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Pro Tem Montgomery Steppe. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing no further discussion on this item, we will thank you very much for the update and look forward to future updates. And we will move to item 26, and that is an informational item on the zero emission bus program and transition plan update. Mr. Wygant will stick with us and we'll kick off this presentation.
Yeah, the bad news is you get me again. So we'll wait for, I think our ZEB and Sustainability Manager, Jared Valdez, will join me here. All right. So Jared Valdez is our ZEB and Sustainability Manager, and I've already introduced myself a couple times, so I'll try not to do it a third time. So what we've prepared here is we come to the board annually to give you an update on the transition to zero emission vehicles. Just as a little bit of history with zero emission vehicles, back in 2000, CARB, California Air Resource Board, put place a regulation to try to entice or drive the industry towards or out of the diesel rank, the dirty diesel world. And that original rule was the urban fleet rule in 2000. And that was kind of the first attempt to try to lower emissions throughout the transit industry. It was somewhat subsidized early on to try to promote that technology. And it's really created the path for natural gas. San Diego MTS was a very early adopter, what we called they took the alternative fuel path instead of trying to maintain a diesel fleet and do a lot of other activities to try to offset their emissions. They very early on adopted the path to go to the cleaner option at the time. And so that got us to where I think in 2020, we actually had gotten rid of our last diesel vehicle. At the same time, CARB was preparing to amend the rule, more commonly known as the ICT, or the Innovative Clean Transit Rule. That was passed in December, and that was taking it to a next step with the intent of matching, at the time, the governor's goal of turning all of the public transit vehicles in California to zero emission by 2040. And so as part of that process, staff and with the board's direction developed a transition plan with a consultant that we brought on board that really said, what would this look like and what steps would need to take forward? The board and California Air Resource Board approved that in 2020. And it's kind of like our Bible of how we're going to get there. It's very flexible because the technology was new. At the time, nobody was anywhere near that, and we had some limited options. The original ICT regulation that was signed into law in 2018 had a tier of a purchasing mandate. It didn't mean that your vehicles had to be 100% by a certain date. It had a goal of 2040. But in 2023, if you were a large agency like we are, you had to purchase 25% ZEBs for every vehicle that you bought. So if you bought 100 vehicles that year, you had to buy 25% zero emission. The regulation has tiers. In 2026, you can see in the chart where it moves to 50%. And in 2029, 100%. And that date wasn't just picked arbitrarily. That's because heavy duty buses typically have a 12-year lifespan. And so the thought process is by 2029, if you have to buy only zero emission, everyone would hopefully be very close to the 2040 goal. It probably wasn't going to happen because not all agencies replace their vehicles at 12 years, but it would be really close and it would get them there. It didn't initially include all the vehicles in our fleet with the 2023 mandate. It excluded 60-foot and 45-foot buses and even our paratransit vehicles, but that we'll talk a little later, but there's a thing called the comprehensive review that's being done right now. I'm actually on that panel with CARB in the state and looking at the technology advancements and the viability and the OEMs that are available to see if they can implement the 2026 modifications, which would be rolling in additional vehicles and moving it from 25% to 50%. Just real quick, a little history. Again, we approved the pilot in 2017. Initially to support the pilot, it was 6 vehicles and they were primarily going to be dispatched out of our Imperial Avenue division just down the street. And we did that, as you can see in the picture on the top right, with plug-in chargers. We expanded that pilot program to 2 additional vehicles shortly after and installed those chargers in the other 3 main divisions to help support that pilot. And the pilot's real premise was to kind of test our specific service area, to kind of see if topography or the range or the ridership or even the training and infrastructure could really support it here at MTS so that we could better refine our transition plan. We began battery electric service in December of 2019. Again, the pilot was really just to kind of help substantiate our initial plan, or to help us modify it, see where it would work or it didn't work, or to allow us to amend our plan based on real life service data. The pilot theoretically ended in December of 2021. By then, we had gotten up to 13 vehicles, I think it was. Today, we have 25 zero emission vehicles out there operating. We have 13 more that we're constructing right now. We'll get our first one probably in the next few weeks. And we've accumulated over 1.5 million miles of battery electric service. A big part of that was really the infrastructure. So I'll just kind of real briefly touch. Every division needs what we call a master plan. We have to actually go and look at the footprint, what kind of charging or fueling infrastructure, if we were to get into hydrogen vehicles, which are actually in our transition plan at a later on in the phase or later years, we would need to use hydrogen to deal with some of the range issues. The whole plan and the regulation are built with the premise that you can do a 1-for-1 replacement. You can actually replace one diesel, or in our case, CNG vehicle, with one zero emission vehicle. There's some range limitations right now, but the technology is advancing. But our estimate was at some point in time, we won't be able to continue up with that need and we'd have to move to hydrogen. So, but a lot of this was just building a plan for all of the divisions, where the infrastructure would go, how we would phase it, built a schedule based on when vehicles are normally replaced. You don't want to build a bunch of infrastructure years ahead of it and maybe outdated. So we did a master plan at all the divisions. We had a big project at our South Bay facility. If you can look below on the right, getting away from the plug-in chargers, we went to an overhead modular autonomous piece of equipment. And so what happens there is the vehicles pull in, the operator gets out just like they normally would. The vehicles autonomously, there's a wand that comes down and charges them when the electricity is the cheapest, and in time, hopefully, to make service the next day. That structure was its first of a kind in the US. A lot of agencies like LA Metro and New York and Boston are mirroring their projects similar to that. So we get extra kudos for that. But that is actually the template that we'll use at all the divisions to support the battery electric versions. We've completed the master plans at all the 4 primary divisions other than our El Cajon facility. We're working on that now. As we grew the fleet to 25 vehicles, once you have infrastructure and you have routes, or what we call blocks, that fit inside the range limitations, you start deploying them at that division. When you can check the first 2 boxes, now you put them out in each division. And we did take a special eye to look at what we call our DAC routes to serve some of our disadvantaged communities, to make sure that those vehicles were getting to some of our most at-risk areas. You'll see in the middle of the chart on the right, or the map, the gold star. That's, a lot of you have heard about our CTAC division. It's very centrally located. It's an important part of our transition because, as you'll see, and maybe it's some slides before and some ahead, these infrastructure projects are big construction projects that have an impact to what we call our continuity of operations. Most of our divisions are what we call mirror to mirror. We're at capacity. Buses are parked within 12 inches of each other, and they're bumper to bumper. And so when we have these huge construction projects, we run out of room to continue the normal day-to-day operations. So CTAC will, at some point in time, give us not only some expansion capacities, but also helps us deal with the ZEB transition. Here's some pictures of that South Bay facility and the wands coming down. And in those master plans, this particular system actually supports 24 vehicles. When phase 2 goes to South Bay, I think it's another 30, but we're just basically mirroring this image throughout the facility as vehicles are coming in, or hopefully ahead of the vehicles coming in. The next major construction project is kind of half underway, really, here at Imperial Avenue, just down the street. We did some preliminary work to prepare for the construction. We have a construction. The board approved a contractor to do phase 1. The design, of course, is done. But before we could start construction, we had to remove some of the other equipment that was bolted down, even underground storage tanks, some old lubricant or even diesel tanks that have been abandoned are going to be underneath where the circle is there. That's where phase 1 is. It's actually going to support 30 charging locations. But before we could start the construction, which is expected late this summer, early this fall, to build the concept that you see in the lower left, we had to get some of that equipment moved. So again, we should start seeing that construction here pretty soon with the intent that it would be done by next summer. Again, we talked about the next division, and the master plans are complete for Kearney Mesa. That would be the next construction project, and that would support 38 charging stations. East County, the master plan, as we mentioned, is still in development. We'll finish the master plan, but we probably won't go to a design, mainly because, as we talked about a couple of months ago, and I'll cover a little bit later in the slides, is we're kind of on a little bit of a pause based on our financial situation and also what the federal government and the state is able to do. But while we're doing that, we continue to do workforce training. We have implemented not only on the TransDev side and on the in-house side, integrating ZEB training into all training. It's built into our in-house apprentice program. We spend a lot of time with our emergency responders to make sure they're up to speed on the equipment and the emergency procedures. Hydrogen, as I mentioned earlier, we're still in our transition plan, but we're trying to stay very involved. We spend a lot of time meeting with other agencies that have started that path and seeing what the hurdles are. The short and the dirty to hydrogen right now is 2 real issues for MTS. Yeah, the vehicles are even more expensive, but the biggest burden is the footprint. If you see in the top right, you'll see a pretty large facility. We really don't have anywhere to put that in most of our divisions. In CTAC's initial design, we did actually build a hydrogen station into it. We're starting fresh, so we had a new spot. But most of our divisions, hydrogen equipment would go in as we decommission our CNG compression stations. Most of them have either 3 or 4 units. And as we have less and less CNG vehicles, we can start to decommission and remove that equipment and then potentially replace it with hydrogen. And then the other big driver is hydrogen is very expensive to operate. We'll talk about it a little bit later. We've made it this far with a lot of support from the state and a little bit from the federal government and some earmarked provisions that have really offset the cost of this transition so far. We'll see it's very expensive as you look at a total cost of ownership. But the problem with hydrogen is your day-to-day operating cost is in some cases 10 times more expensive than what we're running today. So we're also moving forward with a non-revenue vehicle purchase with our friends at SDG&E. They're helping us with the infrastructure, and we're going to get 12 vehicles here at this division here pretty soon. At our Copley division, which is where we run our paratransit service, we're kind of starting our own little pilot over there. That service is primarily run with what we call cutaways, or the small, big vans, I guess you would say. And those vehicles, really, there isn't anything in the industry in the battery electric or hydrogen right now. But what we do have is, as you see in the bottom left, OEMs like Ford and Chevy are starting to produce zero-emission vehicles. And so we've bought 2 of those, and the charging equipment's being installed here real shortly. And so by late summer, we should probably have those in service to kind of really see how they fit. The complexity with access or our paratransit service is its demand response. The vehicles actually leave, unlike our fixed route, where we know exactly where they're going, how far, how fast, what stops, when they'll be back. On the demand response service, when they leave the yard, we have a basic idea what they're going to do in the first hour, and then who knows after that. They could end up with 100 miles of revenue service that day, and they could end up with 250 miles of revenue service in that same 10-hour window or 8-hour window. So that adds a complexity when you're dealing with a range limitation. But we're going to get our feet wet with that. And as I kind of mentioned before, we're going to have 13 new battery electric full-size buses that are going to come and be deployed out of our South Bay facility. And at that point, that overhead structure that we saw in prior pictures will be basically at capacity. And so when IAD opens up with its new overhead structure, we'll probably do some reshuffling so we can kind of balance it out. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jarrett, and he's going to go over some of the performance numbers with the vehicles that we've seen so far.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mike. To jump into efficiency. And so we track this monthly for our battery electric fleet, or I'll just call them BEVs for short. And basically this is a measurement of their fuel economy. And so the best way to really read this graph that you see right here is the lower that number, the better their efficiency is. So as you can see, the 40-foot BEVs actually have a better efficiency than the 60-foot BEVs. And that's primarily because the 60-foot BEVs are a larger, heavier bus, and so it takes more energy for them to operate. This slide right here is efficiency of some various routes that our BEVs operate on. You know, each route has its own characteristic, their own tolerances, their own variances. But one route that really stands out is amongst these is the 227. And the 227, as you can see, is the least efficient. And that's primarily because that solely operates on the 12 60-foot BEVs that we got back in October of 23. And this slide right here, just basically it's a monthly mileage per bus of our BEV fleet. And each month that we track that as well. So the blue bars, those represent average mileage that a typical BEV might get in a month. And that orange line that you see up on top is just basically a baseline of what a CNG bus can do in a typical month. As you can kind of see the progression through the months, that, you know, we're starting to really increase the mileage on these BEVs. However, you know, as you can see that there's still quite a bit of space between those blue bars and that orange line, in which, you know, the takeaway here is it's still not a one-for-one replacement between the buses. So to summarize efficiency, you know, it's affected by the environmental factors that you see listed up above. You know, if BEVs are trekking large hills continuously, or at high speeds, or in rainy, cold weather, or erratic driver behavior, that's going to negatively impact the efficiency of a BEV. And with that, that will bring down that range. So our typical range right now is about 145 miles for our BEV fleet. And the graph that you see on the bottom just pretty much highlights the kind of disparity between the CNG range and the BEV range. So we have a long ways to go with it. And with that, it does limit, like Mike mentioned, the blocks that we're able to assign our BEVs to as well. At this point, we don't have any indication of any battery degradation. We track that on a monthly basis as well, but that will also, you'll see a negative impact with the efficiency and then, you know, the range itself. So this chart right here is a cost per mile comparison between BEV and the CNG. So it's important to highlight that this does not include maintenance costs or the cost of the fleet itself. This is just solely maintenance and just fueling costs. And right now, currently, it is slightly cheaper to operate a BEV than a CNG. And like I said, this doesn't include, you know, total cost of ownership. This is just maintenance and fuel costs. But as our fleet expands, we kind of do predict that this trend might go in reverse. So, you know, as charging costs during the peak charging windows that we might have to be, you know, utilizing, and then also cost of battery replacements as they become more common as well too. So, but as of right now, it is cheaper to operate a BEV compared to a CNG. The graph on the left, so this is just a historical month-to-month, you can say, tracking of our ZEB utility cost. You can see in October of 2023, There was a big spike, and that's primarily because of the 12 BEBs that we received, the 60-foot BEBs, and the incorporation of the overhead structure. So right now we average about 23,000 per month in utility costs. And the graph on the right is just a cost projection of utility costs going out to 2040. We are expecting, you know, as our fleet grows, obviously the utility costs are going to be going up more expensive. So this is just an annual projection. So we're assuming that we might be around 17 million per year for that cost. Graph on the left, this is the charger availability. And with the incorporation of the overhead structure at South Bay, our charger availability is actually improved, as you can see, compared to the historical data that we have. We haven't had any major breakdowns. We've had a few incidences. For example, a tow truck hit one of our pantographs, and one of the pantographs was down for a little while, but it wasn't anything that was detrimental to being able to charge our buses and for service to get out. The graph on the right is bus availability. This is a comparison of our CNG and our BEB. You can see our CNG actually has a better availability rate compared to our BEB fleet. And it's not really because the BEBs, they break down more frequently. It's more so as once they break down, it's hard for, you know, it takes a little bit while when it comes to waiting for parts or just, you know, learning curve with the technology for them to get back out on the road. So. And this, and like I mentioned, we do have a block limitation when it comes to assigning our BEBs to our blocks. So we typically only schedule our BEBs on blocks that are 130 miles or less. And that's indicated on the orange line on this graph. The blue bars, they represent each block and their mileage. And so as you can see, currently we're able to operate about 48% of our total blocks on our current fleet of BEBs. Now, as Mike mentioned, we're going to begin 13 more 40-foot BEBs that will be coming in hopefully by the end of the summer. And we're, you know, assuming that we'll probably get a range of about 150 to 170 miles out of those particular BEBs. And with that, with those 13 BEBs, that will actually increase our block coverage to about 61% with those BEBs. So that's indicated within the red line on the graph as well too. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mike.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Jared. So as I mentioned earlier, you know, to get us this far has really been with the support of our state and federal partners. So I just kind of gave a list of the successful money that we've gotten from the two of them. You know, about just under 4 million from our federal partners. States obviously picked up a lot more of it with 125 and what we call our LC top. What we call the HFIP program is actually added an added discount that is paid by the state to the OEMs to reduce the cost of the vehicle. So we've been pretty successful. I think we've gotten HFIP on almost every vehicle, and that lowers the price between $130,000 to $180,000 per vehicle. TIRCP has been very helpful. As I mentioned before, our partners with San Diego Gas and Electric, they have a program called the Power You Drive, and they've been able to cover some of the costs with our infrastructure. Primarily right now, we've been successful with that, with not only the non-revenues that I mentioned earlier, but our South Bay facility, which was about $8 million. They covered 1.3 of it. So that has been very helpful. VW mitigation, that was a fund set up by the state as it relates to some inappropriate reporting or emissions that Volkswagen had been putting out there for many years. And so as part of that settlement, they were directed to help fund some other programs. And so we were successful in getting money for 5 buses on that one to lower the cost. Unfortunately, the big federal one is really, is either the RAISE grant or the low-no. The low-no was every year it comes up. We have not had any success. It's not from a lack of great efforts and a great team effort. It's just a limited amount of money, and it just has not found its way yet. We will not be held back from continuing to apply for that. So we have lots of future fundings in the near future that we're working on those grants right now, and hopefully we'll hear some more success. I think it doesn't. If you've been watching the news, the federal government isn't a big priority right now, but we'll be hopeful that we'll stand out. So there's a lot going on in this chart, but there is a big takeaway I really want you to see. So, I talked about it doesn't pencil out right now. We've been very successful. I'll talk about some of the advantages of the program and the great successes that we've had, and we've done a lot for our community with this project. But what you're looking at there is a couple of examples of the cost difference. A 40-foot CNG bus is just under $800,000. Its comparable battery electric bus is 1.1, and the hydrogen is 1.6. So that's the money that the state and the federal government has helped offset. When you look at infrastructure costs, the individual chargers were pretty manageable and we were pretty successful, but that was not something that was scalable. We had to go to the overhead system. The South Bay facility cost just a hair over 8 million, as I mentioned earlier, and that supported 24 chargers. San Diego Gas and Electric helped us. We had some money from TRCP for that. But most recently at the IED division, where we're starting that construction here real soon, you can see that the price ballooned up drastically. Now it is a little more capacity, and there are a couple more bells and whistles that we added towards redundancy and whatnot in it, but it wasn't a double or a triple add. And a lot of that is really, 2.5, 3 years worth of inflationary numbers. The cost of the industry being kind of shrunken down. There's not a lot of players in the market. Everyone was really excited about it when money was being thrown out, but now not so much. So hopefully this is not a pattern that continues to escalate at this percent, but as you can see, it's created a pretty good financial burden on us to complete this transition. I've got CTAC listed down there. That's just to kind of remind everybody, and that number is not built into this transition. But in the end, if you look at the right side, you look at the charts, it's a little hard to understand, but the 2.1 billion is what we'll call the status quo in today's numbers. If we had stayed on the alternative fuel path with clean CNG and continued down that path, that's what it would have cost in maintenance, infrastructure, and vehicle operations to continue on the CNG path to 2040. What you see on the right, and this was part of the original transition plan, is the numbers in today. So a delta of about $833 million to complete this transition. Good news, we've already spent some of that. We've gotten funding for that, so we don't need another $833 million. But just, I like to keep track of what it's cost us to complete this transition so that we can plan accordingly. And so that's our finish line, I guess you would say. And I think we're all aware, I don't want to go dwell on this too much, of our upcoming deficits, over 100 million. We all talk about the fiscal cliff. A lot of that is, we have significant capital needs, not only for ZEB, but for other things. And I'll talk about it in a little more in the next slide, but with the board's direction, we've kind of taken a little bit of a pause. And I say a little emphasis on a little bit of a pause because we're still moving forward, but I'll go through the details of it as a reminder. So in February, we decided with the board's direction that we would use what we call our early adoption credits. So we were under the 25% purchase mandate right now. And to maintain a state of good repair, we had the option with CARB's regulation, the ICT, to use our early adoption credits, meaning the 25 vehicles we have today, they were all actually agreed and purchased on paper before the mandate went into place. So for that, they allow you to use that as a credit in future years. And so to buy us a little bit of time in this financial crisis, with your approval, we're exercising those. We still have the 13 battery electrics that are coming in now, and those will go to IED. But for our 25 and 26 purchases after that, we've used our credits so that we can buy CNGs and not have to buy the ZEBs. One, we don't have the infrastructure in place to support after the 13 come. And two, we need to buy ourselves some financial time. The board also authorized us when the 2027 mandate comes, and that could potentially now be at the 50% and could include our cutaways and our small vehicles and our 60 and 45 foots. We don't need any 45 foots for a while, but it could come into play with 60s. We've gotten the authority to work with CARB to potentially get a waiver after we've exercised the rest of our credits. We are not one of very few. Almost every transit agency will be in this boat if 50% threshold happens. Right now, with the state and the federal government and everyone's kind of fiscal challenges, I'm not aware of anybody who could meet the 50% purchasing requirements if that were to happen. But as I mentioned earlier, we're working with the CARB on the comprehensive review, and I think there's going to be some flexibility potentially. I don't think they're going to remove the regulation in its entirety, but maybe we'll see some movement, but time will tell. Well, we should know unfortunately, by the end of the year. It's hard to plan for that, but that's when they're projected to give us some information. On a positive note, this is still our transition plan. We can still get there. We're just going to need a lot of funding and we're going to need a little bit of technologies to continue to advance. As Jared had mentioned, the newest buses that we're getting, all indications are they're going to get quite a bit more range. So when we started this process, we only had about maybe 35% of our blocks could be operated by the technology that was available. Now, if the new vehicles perform at the level we expect them, 61% of our blocks. So that's a major jump in the last 4 or 5 years. But what you see in this graph is that transition to battery electric and hydrogen and getting rid of the combustion vehicles. We can still make it. Really, if you start buying combustion vehicles after 2029 because of their 12-year life cycle, then this would not be obtainable. But it is going to take quite a bit of funding, and technology will continue to advance. We are on the right path. And when I say that is, we could have debated of just fighting. I don't think that's the right thing for the climate. It's definitely not the right thing for our region. We wouldn't have learned anything. We wouldn't have helped the industry advance. We took the option of dual paths. In other words, our transition plan was going to be battery electric and hydrogen. Had we gone into the hydrogen boat full bore and just focused on that, we'd been in a lot of trouble as it comes to operating money right now. Plus, I'm not sure where we would put the station. We would have had a lot of temporary equipment, probably having to bring it in. We would have been in trouble, more trouble than we are today. There is technology progress. As we mentioned, the vehicles are continuing to get a little bit more mileage, almost in line with what our projections in our transition plan as far as efficiency improvement. Prior to the last 6 months or so, I would say there were a lot of investors. There was several state and federal projects to maybe promote hydrogen. Unfortunately, the hydrogen has just gone completely stale right now. There's been many companies that have gone bankrupt. OEMs who were projecting or were building hydrogen have stopped because they're worried that there's not going to be a market for it. The real driver was the trucking industry. Transit, we think we're really big, and I think we are, but in the bigger picture of things, transit's actually a small window. And so for this technology to really become profitable and have lots of players, lots of options, we needed the truck. And unfortunately, that has been scrapped completely. So that may create some stagnant times for a little while, but it'll change. Construction timelines, our ultimate goal in the beginning was always to have infrastructure before we had vehicles. We have managed to do that in the last 5 years. So I'm very proud of the team. Heather's team is probably behind us somewhere. They get a lot of that support for us, and they should get a lot of the credit. But it is complex. It is, especially with less players in the industry, it's becoming complex. Costs, I don't think I need to really hammer on that anymore. But, you know, the gap or the percentage to make this transition compared to the baseline hasn't really changed. It's the costs have changed. You know, we don't need any more vehicles or any more infrastructure. Inflation and the limitations to the people that can provide these services have really driven the cost up. Redundancy, it's still an issue. We've got, and when I say redundancy is in the event you have a natural gas fleet, and, you know, not that the natural gas pipeline systems haven't had, and doing this for 30 plus years, haven't had some very small short-term supply problems that have created impacts, but it's very, very rare. I'm sure everyone around here has dealt with the powers out at your house when you're charging batteries, or even on the hydrogen side. Redundancy in the event of a power outage or a hydrogen stoppage can create impacts to our service. If that happens to a CNG vehicle, as long as the pipeline's fine, we can use emergency generators to run our compressors. There's no impact to the service. We're working along with the industry on trying to find the redundancy. Right now, it's not a huge issue for us because we have 25, soon to be 38 vehicles out of 700 plus vehicles. So we can kind of mitigate that. But we are working on things like battery storage. I think it just in the consent approved standby generators. So it will deal with some of the redundancy issues. But at full scale, it's still an unknown. You're probably going to end up where the utility company will have to bring a second feed to support the battery electric side in, and you'll have to build programs to move vehicles between divisions to support hydrogen, assuming not all your divisions go down at once or have a supply issue. Funding really is the big one it just keeps getting more expensive. I think I covered most of this. You know, the public, the operators, they're performing well. They don't fail any more likely than our combustion vehicles each month. It goes one way or the other. As Jared kind of mentioned, it's more the availability. Once they do fail, the technical expertise and the parts really drive the fact that they're down for longer periods of time. And so that's where you see that fluctuation in his number. The operating cost, as you mentioned, not the total cost of ownership, so excluding infrastructure and the cost of the vehicle. But once we have them, once we've gotten some subsidies to get the infrastructure in place or cover the extra cost of the vehicle, right now they're actually operating at a little bit of an advantage compared to their combustion counterparts. So that's good. That's helping our operating budgets. That may change as we start to get into peak pricing. You know, eventually we'll run out of grid capacity within super off peak. That'll drive the costs up. And then, as Jared had mentioned, the possibility of battery replacements. It hasn't really been a huge issue yet, but it could, and that could drive the maintenance costs up. You know, really hinging on what's going to happen in 2026. We're looking to CARB to see if they implement the 2050 or the 50% at 2026. That is just going to be a long line of people needing an exemption every year. So no one can really do that at this point. Neither the technology or the funding really supports it. If it were to pencil out, and then the investors could get in, then maybe it would happen in a short time. But so it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. And with that, I will open it up to any questions or comments.
Thank you both for the presentation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right, we will open board discussion on this item. We will begin with Director Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the presentation here. What sort of partnership has there been with San Diego Community Power?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear.
I can answer that. We are not in, actually, Mike Thompson's here. He knows the intricacies of it, so I'll let him answer.
Good morning, Mike Thompson. I'm the Deputy CFO. We purchase our electricity through a third party that we competitively bid, so we do not buy our electricity through San Diego Community Power.
Right, but beyond the purchase of power from San Diego Community Power, what additional conversations have been had about achieving the goals of our zero emission goals in partnering with Community Power?
Yeah, we have not any other conversations.
Okay, so I understand all of the headwinds that were explained here. Not partnering with San Diego Community Power, having discussions with them, I think is a real missed opportunity on our part. They have not just a technical expertise in terms of what opportunities might be there, But I think that they can bring different potential partners to the table. I know that there is particular interest in behind the meter projects that will address some of the potential risks that you all have identified here, which are real, but can be addressed through those behind the meter projects. So again, completely understanding everything that was presented there, but I think I really would like to encourage MTS to reach out to San Diego Community Power and have some discussions about what these zero emission goals look like and what opportunities there might be for power purchase agreements. Any number of potential options that could involve either minimal or no capital investment from MTS, and move us toward the goals that we have. It just feels
Just
like
to
an untapped
clarify,
resource.
we're in a direct access program. We have been long before community power came out, and we always are looking at both their structure as well as our own. We had conversations with community power when it was first put together.
Yeah, I mean, just from our operational perspective, it would be an increased cost to our electricity costs.
Yeah, I'm not talking about
Yeah, I understand.
purchasing electricity.
So we can have conversations with them.
Well, yeah, and I think what I'm
Infrastructure side.
yes, on the infrastructure side, because that's like the power piece understood. The infrastructure side, that's where I think the real opportunity lies. And again, to not have the discussions, I think we're leaving a lot of potential opportunities on the table. Again, every headwind that you all presented, I'm not disputing those. What I am suggesting, strongly recommending, is that we look at these alternative ways of either working around those headwinds or through those headwinds through potential partnership with community power. Again, so yeah.
Great, absolutely. And we have probably more than a dozen other infrastructure phases. I'll absolutely reach out to them, see what they could do to help us with that. Appreciate that.
Absolutely, because as they look to build out, potentially look to build out infrastructure here. And for whatever it's worth, I think that the potential value lies not just in conversations around their zero emissions programs, but other opportunities as well. Electricity is not a small part of we spend a lot on it. And we also have a lot of property that has the potential of being power producing assets for the agency and for the region, and it would seem well worth sitting down and seeing what opportunities lie there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Eula Rivera. Director Moreno.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for the presentation, Mike, Jared, and Heather. I have been following your work closely in the past 6 years. And to say that MTS is committed is an understatement, I think. Committed to the zero emissions fleet. I think, if I'm not mistaken, since I've been a board member, the last I remember we had about $300 million earmarked for the zero emission program. It's a shame to hear that hydrogen has gone down the tube, I guess, so to speak. And it's, a full 180 from a year ago on what folks were talking about when they were talking about hydrogen. Who knows, that might change, right, in another year. I had a few questions. And thank you for elaborating on the technology of electricity and how important state and federal backing of all these programs, how important it is. We just, in Otay Mesa 2, I think the president scrapped the electrification, the ability to build electrification modules in Otay Mesa 2, which obviously saves a lot of money, but in the long run is probably going to be very detrimental in the future. So yes, we're being impacted, completely with the administration. How many miles does you said the electric vehicles get 145 miles right now? And how much does CNG get?
So great questions. So the battery electric bus, we plan on the blocks. We can assume that every day without something strange happening, the battery electric bus will go about 130, 135. Some days, depending on the topography and the ridership and the average speed, it's amazing how much it can be varied. How cold it is. If you got to run the heater a lot, the heater just destroys the electricity range for a vehicle. But on a good day, it may go 150, but you can't plan for that if what that good day is going to be. So it'll always go 130, 135. The new vehicles that are coming in, there's a lot of promise. There's actually more dense onboard storage as we move towards more electric driven subcomponents. They are more efficient than maybe a hydraulic motor or something like that. So the new vehicles are expected to get somewhere between 150 and 170. The CNG vehicles, some of them depends on what year and what tanks, but almost all of them will go deep into the 400s, if not 500. Some are 60-foot buses like the 235 route, does more than 500 miles every single day by every one of those buses. Those are outliers. I think we had a graph a ways back in Jarrett's portion of the presentation, right there. So if you look on the far right, that one that goes over 500, that's the 235. That is the outlier. That is not a representation of our service. Like you see, the red line is potentially the amount of blocks. More than half, 61% of ours could be dealt with a battery electric if they truly do 150 every day, which is they think in the new version is. So the technology will need to continue to advance on the battery electric side for that red bar to go up a little further. On the hydrogen, it varies just like battery electric because it is a battery electric vehicle. We just call it a range extender. It has onboard hydrogen that's converted to electricity. It's still driving it through batteries and traction motors, just like a battery electric vehicle. Depends which vehicle and which application, but typically they're getting somewhere between 220 and 275. So obviously they're not going to do the 235 either. At some point in time, we may have to get away from the 1-for-1 if we can get that far. And look at other options like en route, but that has all of its own, what we call en route or opportunity challenge or charging. For battery electric, that has some of its own challenges. You can't do mid-route in fueling with hydrogen. So at that point, it may be either splitting the route or the block into two separate runs. Never efficient. That's not a good idea necessarily. I'm saying it can't happen. It just has.
I'm thinking about bus drivers.
Yeah,
as you're saying,
somewhere to store too much. Yeah. See, when you go away from the 1-for-1, this whole thing gets really bad.
Yeah.
Not only drivers, overlaps, but you got storage for that many more buses.
Yeah.
And as we know, that's a real issue. So, and that's why the CARB regulation gave us kind of the off ramps for this. If the technology doesn't allow 1-for-1, this is an option for us. We're in, and just to go back, if I may, hydrogen didn't go down the tubes. I think it's just like a hard brake check for a while. The OEMs that were right there and they're getting ready to introduce it, they pulled it because they're just worried there's not any money to subsidize it. There are several, one of the big players in the hydrogen market on the fueling and infrastructure side was a company called Plug Power, and they had some great technology. They were doing projects at North County. They went under.
Well, and that requires a lot of infrastructure. If you're going to keep your hydrogen in your facility or you truck it in with a diesel fueled truck, right, from Utah.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to get hydrogen. Truck it in liquid or gas, electrolyze it or reform it. And there's complexities and cost variables. We would be here a while to talk about those, but they are complex.
Obviously, there's a cost associated to this, and the cost is going to be, from what I presume, transferred over to the user, which has implications as well. So we have a lot to chew on. The zero emission goal is an ambitious goal. It's one that I've been watching since I represent Otay Mesa within the trucking industry. Infrastructure is huge. Nobody's building the facilities to plug in. Cost is, enormous. It's an enormous factor, especially considering just, as a side note, with the truckers losing about 30% of what is it called? Gross within their industry. It's a very sensitive topic. But I thank you, Mike. I thank you for your leadership on this. I think we're really lucky to have Mike, really a true leader in this space. I've always been curious since I was in the budget chair. It's a lot of money that we're holding on to, obviously a very important thing to do, but considering all of our budget challenges, I do wonder what we're going to do moving forward and what technology we're going to use. And my understanding is South Bay has the capacity even to hold a hydrogen tank. And we have the new facility over in District 4. I don't remember what we're calling it now. CTAC. But please keep us up to date. This was a wonderful presentation. Thank you, Jared. And once again, thank you, Heather, for your commitment to this endeavor.
Thank you, Director Moreno. Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. Jared, Mike, relevant and good information. So thank you for taking the time to prepare that. My questions have to do with the weight of a battery electric versus a CNG bus. What can you tell us about how many more pounds does a battery electric versus a CNG?
Yeah, so it is an issue. It's actually a limiting factor in the technology advancement. Ironically, we have the bar up here. It depends on the vehicle. The first generations of ones with limited range, whether it was 466 onboard kilowatt versus 610 and whatnot. The OEMs were really flirting with trying to balance that weight out, because really the limitation is not the tires. You can buy better tires, you can buy better axles, you can upgrade your suspension. The limitation is the carrier requirement on how much an axle weight can be on your city streets or your county streets. That's the limiting factor. And so initially, just like CNG vehicles with all the heavy equipment at the back, the real axle weight was on the rear. We were at 24,000 pounds limitation. Transit had some exemptions in certain cases, but that was like the limiting factor. And so when they took all the CNG equipment out and they put the battery electric on, they're like, oh, well, I'm right at that limit, so I can't do anything more. So then they start moving it forward and balancing it out towards the front to get that extra range. But yes, they're in some cases 5,000 to 8,000 pounds heavier holistically over a bus that weighs nearly 40,000 pounds.
Okay, so 5,000 to 8,000 pounds heavier. So has the American Public Transit Association, our industry, or other related industries done any white papers of the impact of that extra 5,000 to 8,000 pounds on our roads?
Not that I'm aware of from APTA. I know that there are several other agencies and consultants that have worked on it at the state level to maybe try to delay this regulations requirement. This agency actually worked with CTA many years ago to get that axle weight moved up to allow this to even develop. It even, at some point in time early on, it actually became a problem with CNG vehicles. And so that number has been moved. California for a longest time had a more limiting axle weight limitation than the federal carrier limits. And so that has been adjusted. And then there's some discussion that may have to be another waiver that transit applies for to get it moved up to let this technology continue to advance. But I'm not aware of any APTA panel that was put together to say what the impact to the road is. I know there's been lots of city managers that have addressed it and had some, real concerns. We almost deal with that on a regular basis. Any stop where we have a lot of frequency of service, it's not uncommon to see potholes developing at a higher frequency because of the weight, similar to your trash companies.
And I guess that's something each one of our cities will have to consider measuring the impact on the roads in front of stops.
Yeah.
Certainly in older streets like University Avenue, which goes through multiple cities, El Cajon Boulevard through multiple cities, you see dimples in the lanes from decades of use. I don't, whether that's truck use, whether that's bus use, but we certainly know weight has an effect. And would we have to re-engineer our roads to factor in an extra 5,000 to 8,000 pounds. My second question is, okay, with an extra 5,000 to 8,000 pounds, have there been any discussions or white papers on the safety? The heavier the vehicle you have, the longer it takes to stop for an obstacle. Any information about battery electric versus CNG and the extra weight versus stopping time for obstacles?
I have not seen that. I have seen lots of engineering approaches on the OEM side on how they deal with the extra weight. And we already see that in our vehicles today, whether it be the integrity and the robustness of the suspension or even the braking components. The braking components on the vehicles have been been redesigned to accommodate the extra weight, because what they're dealing with is mandates as it relates to NTSB and braking rates as a commercial vehicle. So they have a goal that they have to achieve. And if the bus is too heavy to do that, and that's rollover, heaviness, that's crash worthiness, all those things are taken into factor. They have not been giving, other than California's adjustment to the per axle weight, they've not been given any other grants or waivers of omissions of the requirements, I guess is the best way to say that.
Are our bus drivers measured at all on hard brakes, things like that? Would we have to adjust that metric for battery electric versus CNG to be fair to the employee?
So every bus operator, when we get electric vehicles, like every vehicle, it's not specific to electric, they have to go through orientation for each style of vehicle and get, in essence, checked off or certified on that. We do monitor hard braking throughout our system, regardless of the propulsion type. Occasionally it will identify a defect in a particular bus, but there has been no pattern associated with battery electric versus hard braking. I'm well aware of which fleet has the most hard braking incidents, and it's not a battery electric fleet.
And my final question is, it's very simple. Are all the battery electric buses today in operation, the 25 and soon to be 38, are they all operated by MTS employees or are any TransDev employees?
They're pretty spread out. They're both. Yeah. If this transition is holistic, then everyone's got to get on board. They've gotten the same amount of training. Matter of fact, I think TransDev, because of the South Bay facility, is definitely operating more than in-house is right now.
Okay. All right. Thanks for your answers.
No problem.
Thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Director Bush.
Yes, thank you, staff. And Mike, your expertise, I really appreciate you teaching me and educating me personally about this at the conferences. And I want to encourage my fellow board members, if you get the chance to go to the APTA conferences like Vice Chair Goebel mentioned, I think it's a really good learning opportunity, the details, and see it in person and hear what the industry experts and what's going around the country. It was really helpful. So I appreciate that. My main question is about, so we're talking a lot about health. Or we're talking a lot about the cost, but not enough to me about the health, because I think if we take a step back from this discussion, yes, there's an economic cost, but what is the health cost to this? And so my question is, how, if we are we factoring in savings from the health perspective? So the reduction in emissions, whether it's diesel or whether it's CNG, all of that, there is the data, at least from a high level, and I could speak for being on Air Pollution Control District, there is enough of that data. Maybe you guys might not have that in-house, but that we have access to it. So is that being factored into the report or into the budget considerations?
So, thank you very much. That's a great question. You and I have actually had that discussion, and we are working on that. It's easy for us to verify and quantify greenhouse gas reductions locally, or what we call tailpipe, because we know how much emissions, whether it's greenhouse gases, GHG, particulates from our existing combustion fleets. And the answer is it's 100% improvement. So we absolutely have that data and we can chart that, but then converting it onto, what the health impacts, they want to see what they call a well-to-wheel analysis. In other words, how is the electricity or hydrogen made? How did it get to you? The emission, the application of operating the vehicle for us is huge because it's 100% improvement. But not all electricity is made equally, not all hydrogen is. And so we've been talking to our consultant that helped us with the original plan to see if they can kind of help us quantify that and build some charts that we could track that on a regular basis on the health side of it. You know?
Got it. And just to be specific, I'm not talking about the GHG, the methane or carbon dioxide. I'm talking about, you mentioned the particulate matter, diesel. Yes. So the emission, the tailpipe emissions from CNG and diesel buses. I'd like to see that compared to as this report continues to develop and we continue to get updates. So I'm fine with this information right now, but I think moving forward, having that be able to factor in, because at the end of the day, the reason why we're doing this, yes, it's more expensive, but we're doing it because we're saving lives at the end of the day, because we're improving the health of the community that's around these buses. And so as a public agency, it's really important that we factor that in, not just the dollar amount, but the impact on our lungs and our lives. And I'm happy to connect you with Miney Luther, who's on our EPCD staff, that I think that can help streamline a lot of these calculations for you all. And to member Elo Rivera's point, I agree that sending community power that they'd be good to reach out to, and to that point, air pollution control district. So on highlighting and emphasizing the potential, the emissions reductions, and then the health impacts in the community. And then final question on hydrogen. When I went to, I think it was last year's conference, heard a lot from, I think it was Dayton, Ohio, or I forgot which part of Ohio, on the hydrogen front, and they invested a lot into it. So real quick, I guess anecdotally, or any data you have on how they were doing?
It was Canton, Ohio. Yeah, absolutely. They were, not that
like where they're at today, now that we have this plateau.
They're still working on it, and that is their path. They are, what was I don't know, they're on the hydrogen team, I guess you would say. There's some other reasons for that. They have a huge investment in their community as it relates to making fuel cells. Their relationship to electrolyzing plant makes things more conducive for them, but they're still, Canton is, I haven't checked in with them in a few months, but they're definitely still on the hydrogen path. Probably the most obvious hydrogen path in our region was maybe Sunline Transit out in Palm Springs. They have tried every different way to make hydrogen, and they've kind of pivoted. They're still doing some hydrogen. Obviously, they had the vehicles, they're 12 years. They're starting to do more battery electric and kind of rethinking it, because they just haven't, they've been working really hard to find a way to make hydrogen cheap. And they have it, and we need people like that to do that. So, because the second is cheaper for us, that I'm standing here in front of you and say that's where we're going, but that hasn't happened yet.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for all the work and all the analysis, because I also, at the same time, we have to be, fiscally responsible and all that too. So, so I appreciate the holistic approach. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Bush. Director Fleming.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. Very informative. I have a very basic question. With the electric buses, you mentioned maintenance on them, including batteries and battery life. What's the process of disposing of the batteries once, when batteries have to be replaced on these? What's that look like?
Well, a good question. Thank you. So far, the batteries that we've had to replace have been the responsibility of the OEM. And so under a warranty program, we built in a certain amount of warranties, but that is an issue that will come up at some point in time. How do you dispose of that? There are several companies, and I think they're going to be around for a while, because there's no shortage of zero emission vehicles or battery electric vehicles. But there are companies that have a second life program for them. Whether you use them for battery redundancy or they have a totally different source, because a battery is, in the case of a bus, for instance, it is not one big single component. So if you were just trying to resell that, it probably would only work in a transit bus, and it would probably only work in the exact same transit bus that we have. But fortunately, once you open a battery enclosure, it's a series of a lot, hundreds, in some cases, thousands of lithium ion batteries There's some other componentries or chemistries in some of them, but they're used for lots of other things. So there still is a market. Not that we're going to offset our budget deficit with it, but there clearly will be people that are interested in picking that up so we don't have to be responsible for what we call cradle to grave. In other words, we have to deal with the proper hazmat disposal process of it.
It would, thank you. That was something I wasn't aware of on the cradle to grave, just following this down the rabbit hole a little bit farther. When they go to grave, what does that look like? I know so far we're dealing with the OEM, right?
Correct.
But when we're even at that point, how are they, do you know how they're being disposed of from the OEM and or how we would be disposing of them? I'm curious what the impact of that is.
Right. So I'm not entirely sure what the OEM is doing with them. I assume they're repurposing and refurbishing them, or they may be selling them to a third party that has a second life for them. My plan right now, if I had to dispose of one, would be contacting that third party. That's actually an approved process as it relates to your hazardous duty manifest. So right now, that's how I would get rid of them. I would not try to figure out how to dissect them and try to break them down to where they would not be a hazard to the environment or anybody.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, Director Fleming. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, I will thank everybody for the robust discussion. Thank you for the presentation. Our final item, item 27, is an action item. It is on the revisions to MTS Board Policy 21 regarding revenue generating display advertising, concessions, and merchandise. Mark Olson will be providing the presentation, and once you get settled in, feel free to begin whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, good morning. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members of the board, for allowing me to come here and talk about this item. Again, I'm Mark Olson, Director of Marketing and Communications here at MTS, and today we're going to be talking about revisions to MTS Board Policy 21, which governs our advertising policy. A couple of years ago, the board directed staff to remove the prohibition of alcohol in advertising, which would allow us to do some alcohol advertising on the system. The main goal of this policy revision was to generate more non-fair revenue to help us deal with the budget deficit we're experiencing. So just in general, Board Policy 21, just an overview, sets our advertising program. It applies to our vehicles, our stations, certain bus benches, shelters, and depending on the jurisdiction, we have shelters and benches throughout our whole jurisdiction, except for Poway and Coronado. And then we're also working on some agreements, and we will be expanding into areas like Chula Vista and El Cajon. All subject matter must be limited to commercial speech, public service, announcements by public agencies, or MTS marketing content. And again, the primary objective of this is to generate revenue. It does prohibit any contact that could detract from this goal, such as harming our marketing potential, our reputation, our brand, or impose matters of public debate and commercial views. So a couple of years ago, the direction from the board for staff was to remove the alcohol ad prohibition for 2 years. Also work with the city of San Diego on policy amendments to allow alcohol advertising on bus shelters and benches within their jurisdiction. And about 90% of our inventory for shelters and benches is within the city of San Diego currently. Also require responsible drinking messages for these advertisements to be included, and then also include data tracking of the location of advertisements to ensure there are no disparities in disadvantaged communities. So overall, we did execute 5 agreements through our advertising partner, which is Clear Channel Outdoor. 2 of those were for trolley wraps. Breckenridge Distillery was a trolley wrap, Dios Azul, which is a tequila brand, and then a few different bus shelter advertisements through our digital program that we have. 60 of our bus shelters have digital capabilities, and Smart and Final, Proximo Spirits, and Cutwater Spirits were those 3 that advertised on that part of our system assets. Total gross revenue was $66,622. Responsible drinking messages were included, and no public complaints or feedback was received through our support services mechanisms or on social media. The revenue here that we experienced was much lower than we anticipated. This was due to a couple reasons when speaking with Clear Channel as to what happened here. Overall, in the beverage category, alcohol sales are just down. People are drinking less, and so that means alcohol companies are making less revenue. So in turn, there's smaller marketing budgets. And then coupled with that, with our, this is a new space for a lot of alcohol companies. So when a lot of times the national brands, when they want to do advertising, they'll allocate funding for a specific market like the Southwest region or the San Diego region. And considering this was a fairly new platform for them to advertise in, they were still getting used to it. It is a new policy, so they weren't ready to kind of dive in with new dollars into this new space for them. So here are a few examples of the advertising that was on the system. Here's the Breckenridge Distillery wrap, including the responsible drinking message. And here's one with Dios Azul, which was a good selling point because they are the official tequila partner for the San Diego FC. And we actually separately have a partnership with San Diego FC. So there was a good connection there between this brand and the partnership that we have with San Diego FC. Here's a Smart and Final ad that they ran where they wanted to promote their wine aisle as being one of their favorite aisles. So this was part of a bigger buy that they had on our system where they were promoting different aisles within their store to target different consumers. Here's a partnership that we had with La Mesa Oktoberfest. So there, what was great about this is that this is really one where we could promote people going to an event that has alcohol at it. And so, we were able to do this with the La Jolla Wine and Food Festival, as well as La Mesa Oktoberfest. So it wasn't just like bus back ads like you can see here. It was also social media ads and a few different other things where we were able to have that responsible drinking message included when it was specific to people holding beer steins and actually at an event or drinking beer like that. So it was a good partnership that we have with these two organizations. We'd like to expand on that if this gets approved as well to other organizations. So with the City of San Diego MOU, we did successfully enter a 10-year agreement about a year ago to manage advertising, installation, and maintenance of bus shelters and benches within the city's jurisdiction. It removed a requirement to also follow city advertising policy. And this allows more consistent advertising requirements throughout our entire service territory. So the other MOUs that we have with other cities defer back to the MTS advertising policy. This one was a little bit different. So we were able to come to an agreement with the City of San Diego to defer back to our advertising policy, which was great to provide uniformity across our system. The city revenue, about 90% of all shelters and benches are in the City of San Diego, like I mentioned earlier, and the city revenue share must be used for capital improvements in support of transit. That was one of the requirements that we had there. As for disadvantaged community tracking, we didn't find any indication of disproportionate impacts in disadvantaged communities. And the way we measured this was through the Cal EnviroScreen 4.0, which is a model used that tracks certain socioeconomic factors to identify disadvantaged communities. As you can see in the purple, those are the identified disadvantaged communities. What we found is that 5 out of the 60 digital advertising shelter locations were in disadvantaged communities, so about 8%. And then 20 to 25% of the orange and green lines pass through the disadvantaged communities as well. So we didn't feel that that had a disproportionate impact with these advertisements on disadvantaged communities. So in summary, revenue was lower than projected, but we think that will grow if this policy matures and includes alcohol. We want to make sure that we're doing that in a responsible way too, and ensuring that the advertisements are tasteful and they aren't over represented in our whole advertising portfolio throughout the entire system. So we're going to keep a close eye on that. We did not receive any complaints. We did not find any disparities in the advertising placements. We'll continue. We thought it was successful with continuing to, align our ad policy regionally to have that consistency across our entire system. And for this reasons, because we still think this ad policy change, has time to mature and grow to really see the true benefits of it and to see what it can do. We are recommending a permanent adoption of the revised policy. So with that, the board recommendation is to conclude the advertising policy or alcohol advertising pilot period and make permanent the revisions of MTS Board Policy 21 and approved on June 15th, 2023. So with that, I can open it up for questions, comments, and thank you very much, Chair and the board, for this opportunity.
Thank you. Clerk, do we have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comments, Chair.
All right, we will move then to board discussion and entertain a motion. At some point, we'll begin our conversation with Director Foster.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the slide deck, you say there's no indication of disproportionate impact. What is that? Can you clarify exactly what you mean by no disproportionate impact?
What I mean by that is that it doesn't represent, these advertisings are not in more than half of disadvantaged communities. I mean, I think that would be the way that we were judging it is, how much of an impact is it going to have in that area is based on how much coverage is in that area. Where if it was, 30 out of 60 ad locations or 35 or 40 ad locations, that might be something where we would say it's disproportionately impacting those communities.
I don't know if that is necessarily the proper measuring tool, especially considering when you look at the actual dynamics of communities, where I may have a liquor store on every corner in my community versus what the liquor store makeup might be in a community in Rancho Bernardo or Rancho Penasquitos. And so I am in favor of trying to maximize opportunities to increase revenues, and especially as we are having the conversations around fiscal cliffs and the alarms at the gate that are being signaled. But I'm not sure, based on what's in front of us, that it's as simple as we may have, as you say, 5 out of 60 digital items in the way you're quantifying things. The other question I would ask is, as you are having these types of conversations and making these analysis, have you reached out to the County of San Diego and Behavioral Health Service folks to look at best practices, what these types of things mean, and maybe get insight into a better way to monitor this, to really drive down and to really determine when we say there's no disproportionate impact. And so I just have some concerns. And as you say, it travels through the orange line. And also keeping in mind that I'm gonna go back to the Sandex study that was done in regards to raising of the cost to ride public transportation. And it was said that over 70% of our ridership come from certain economic backgrounds, where we know alcohol use is a very, very challenging discussion in certain communities. So I'm concerned on this. I understand where you're currently at. I'm going to listen to the rest of my colleagues, hopefully, to see what their comments are before I can say that I support this item as we currently stand. Not to say I won't get there, but I just think based on the information provided, I think there needs to be some more, I guess I'll use the term subject matter experts on all sides of this and stakeholders to have some additional conversation. When we're talking about something, because it seems like this focus on alcohol and certain things, right? So all for promoting, small businesses having opportunities to promote those types of things. But if we are talking about specific things such as alcohol, I just think there needs to be a more robust conversation, bringing some other subject matter experts in to make sure we are not, I guess, bringing some unintended harms to our ridership and how we're delivering the service. So thank you, Chair. That concludes my comments.
And
And if I could just respond, I just want to make sure that I clarify for us kind of going forward, especially if we get direction from the board on additional analysis that you may want to do in the disproportionate impact, I guess, to take it out of kind of legal terms. And, I think our understanding of the policy direction of the board was that removing allowing alcohol advertisement, that the board did not want us to concentrate, or unfairly focus those ads in disadvantaged communities. And so, in that sense, when you look at the 5 out of 60, I think that was trying to demonstrate for the board that we have put these ads throughout our community, and we are not concentrating those ads only to be on static displays in disadvantaged communities. So if there's another way you also want us to track and measure it, it would be helpful if we had some additional kind of guidance, and whether it's kind of legal terms or talking to other people, or just in general, what is the plain language of the policy you want to make sure that we're implementing.
All right. Let's go to Director Dillard.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark, for the presentation. I just had a suggestion regarding people drinking less. There are a lot of new companies that are coming on that are offering alcoholic alternatives. And I don't know if you have any reservations about reaching out to some of those companies, but there's now, non-alcoholic beers that are really super popular. There's a lot of different companies that are popular companies that are offering that alternative, as well as other non-alcoholic drinks. And it might be a good way to, keep that as an option for revenue, as an alternative, especially since people are starting to cut back significantly on alcohol. Just a suggestion, unless you are already doing that.
Well, I think it's part of the sales package that our partners at Clear Channel have. And a lot of alcohol companies do have the non-alcoholic beverage options. And I think you're right, they are becoming more popular. So we could see those opportunities present themselves. I think also in general, with the advertising locations, a lot of times, these companies, they just want to advertise in entertainment districts or areas that are popular where there's already a lot of activity, bars, restaurants. So the beach areas are very popular, downtown San Diego popular, some of the mid-city areas that have a lot of entertainment as well. So that's pretty much where, the advertisers in this category want to be. So they don't necessarily want to be in they don't want to have their advertisements in other areas of our service territory. So they do sell it in packages like that as well.
So are you saying that they only want to advertise the alcoholic beverages, or are they willing to be flexible?
I think they would be willing to be flexible. Yeah, and we can explore that. I think those options are also available at restaurants and places like that now as well as craft beer breweries. So I think it would be something that they'd be interested in looking at too.
Yeah, I could appreciate that, because I know that there's a mixture a lot of times when you have popular locations like restaurants and bars and whatnot. There are people there asking for non-alcoholic beverages, and so that crowd is mixed. And so it seems like to me that would be an additional way to, I'm not saying not to get their advertisement for alcoholic beverages, but to try to get additional advertising for non-alcoholic. If we continue to ask, then maybe they'll see that as a popular thing that they should also be doing. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Dillard. Director Fleming.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll say that I have some serious reservations over this policy. And part of my reservation over and above alcohol is that it would be the camel getting the nose in the tent. And what's to keep this from expanding to dispensaries advertising on MTS?
Well, that would be a board decision. That currently is against our policy to allow cannabis advertising on our system.
And it's also federally still illegal, and a lot of our equipment and other items are paid for by the federal government.
Okay, yeah,
So
thanks for answering the question. Yeah, I have reservations.
Thank you, Director Fleming. Director Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to start by saying that I too support revenue generating opportunities as well, but I have some questions. A few months back, there was a bunch of billboards around town with just a big gun on it. And there was one that was in my district, and I got calls from constituents. Not the best message, right? Were there any community stakeholders or any of our large nonprofits that deal with public health? Were they consulted in any of this decision-making? I wasn't here when it happened.
No, we did not. This was something that was done at the board level, and we implemented it from that point. But that is something that we can go back and do. I think certainly this is good input and valuable input. And I think, hopefully we can find a path. And I think there needs to be some more study done on it. But I think that's a good point.
Well, community input always good. And just to Director Foster's point, as far as how we calculate disproportionate impact, maybe we consider the fact that the blue line has more ridership than the other lines. So there's more people seeing those ads. And in my part of the blue line, 3 stops, E Street, H Street, Palomar, you're about a block or 2 away from a liquor store once you get off. So more people are seeing it, and more people have access to alcohol off of those stops. Just something to consider when we calculate that disproportionate impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Fernandez. All right, let's go to Director Bush.
Yes, thank you, staff. I do support this item, and I have some ideas and suggestions to address some of the points on public safety risks that I think my colleagues are concerned about. But I appreciate the work done on this, and I hear everyone's concerns about the risks of overexposure of alcohol. Or I think ultimately will this policy lead to more of an abuse of alcohol in the community and health? And so I think that what we've done in the past to mitigate that by balancing it out with, I think we're about advertising for substance abuse. Or can you talk about what we were doing to mitigate again?
Well, with this pilot project, what we did is we required a responsible drinking message to be on the advertising. But we do work with the County of San Diego, Health and Human Services, and others like that with public service announcements as part of our Board Policy 21.
Got it. So I'm open to maybe moving forward. What I would suggest to my colleagues is if we're all in agreement with at least the revenue portion, because I think this was like a good progress and a good step. So I'm open to making this, I'm supportive of making this a permit, especially with the fiscal cliff that we have coming up. But in response to Member Foster, who talked about I think ultimately it's like, are we using the right metrics? I don't think CalEnviroscreen is the best metric because that is really environmentally focused in terms of air pollution and the impacts to health, not necessarily alcohol focused. So I would suggest, and I don't know if staff can come back in 2 months or 3 months, whether it's August or September, I'm open to that. But I would suggest going through the County Health and Human Services and asking them specifically. I think they'd probably be the best public agency that deals with what are the ways that we can mitigate negative health impacts and what is the best geography. I think they have data on, I don't know if it's concentration of liquor establishments, if that's the right. So I'm open to what the metric is. But I think the question is, has there been an increase of alcohol related incidents? Like, is there a correlation like with the advertising? So I don't know that we know the answer to that question. I think they'd be the best to respond to that. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to support the board recommendation, staff recommendation to make this policy permanent, but ask that staff come back at the earliest available opportunity with additional information on how we can adjust the metrics or the geography. So moving away from Cal Envira's screen and working with the County Health and Human Services Agency on if there's been an increase in alcohol related incidents because of this. So I'll make that a motion.
All right, thank you, Director Bush. Let's go to Vice Chair Goebel.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to second the motion. I think that's a good redirect on some of the measurements. To Director Foster's comment on, can we get any deeper than just 5 out of 60 sites? I agree with you. To Director Fernandez, consider population. I agree with you. What I would suggest is a bus stop that has a 10,000 vehicle counts per day is different than a bus stop with 1,000 vehicle counts per day going by it. In the same way, a bus stop with 200 passengers on that route per day is different than a bus stop with 20 passengers per day. So passenger counts for ridership should be included as a weighting factor, and traffic counts in front of the bus stop should be a weighting factor. I think those two things can at least get a little further than 5 out of 62.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair Goebel. Let's go to Director Elo Rivera.
All right, thank you, Chair. I appreciate the motion and the second that are on the floor. And I think this is an item, I want to acknowledge the work that's done and the work that was done from the direction of the board to explore this, right? As for the last 4.5 years, some of us have been really beating the drum around revenue that doesn't start on the backs of our riders, especially our lowest income riders. And so this is an effort to do that. How we do that obviously is super important. We need to have a conscious, be very conscious of how we're doing it, and not abandon our values as we're trying to maximize revenue. But I do see that you all are working to maintain that balance, and I appreciate that. Continuing to be thoughtful about it, I think is super important, making sure that we're tracking the data to ensure that the impacts that we're all, I think, wanting to avoid, we are continuing to avoid those. I think that's important. But more than anything, I wanted to say, I appreciate the effort and wanted to acknowledge for the other board members, this is a product of the board's direction. And so thank you for that. And obviously it continues to be a board decision as to whether or not this policy exists.
Thank you, Director Elo Rivera. Director Foster.
Yes, thank you. Just a point of clarification. So as we are talking about these different points and looking for some additional information to come back from a process perspective, with the action that's being asked here today and the approval that's given, when this information comes back, what form will that be in? An informational item, an action item? What will that be in regards to if there's other issues or concerns as the conversation continues?
So there's been a lot of suggestions as to what we're going to research and, traffic counts, et cetera. That's a lot of work for how much revenue have we generated from the advertisements?
It's been 66,622.
And then what portion of that came to MTS?
55%, so a little more than half.
Okay, so about 25 grand, 30 grand came to MTS over this. So if the sense is that the board no longer wants this to be in our portfolio of advertising, then I suggest we table this, end the pilot, and go back to where we were. Because it's really not worthwhile for us to spend a lot of money trying to do all this research and monitoring with all the different points that have been made here today. I mean, we could, but I'm just suggesting that we look at the cost benefit of the advertising first off the top. I just know that the resources in the marketing department right now are extremely threadbare because of the other initiatives that we're working on. And we might have to bring in more resources, that kind of thing.
Okay, I appreciate that response. And you know, with the return on investment, I guess I'll call it. You know, there's this first and a second, so I think we will be taking action. So I was just asking in terms of my position and my thought process at this moment, and I'll leave that there and turn it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Foster. Director Bush, I tried to write down a motion that I think captures your intent, but you can let me know if I captured your intent correctly. I have a motion and a second to approve the staff recommendation and direct staff to return to the board as soon as possible with information on how best to evaluate the potential disproportionate impacts of alcohol advertising, including a consultation with the San Diego County Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right. We have that motion made by Director Bush. We have it seconded by Vice Chair Goebel. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing Director Fleming, please proceed.
I'm just going to say that based on the roughly $30,000 of revenue that this is generating for MTS, it seems like a whole lot for a little of anything. There's a whole lot more levers that could be pulled within MTS to save a lot more than $30,000 than the $30,000 revenue we're going to generate off of this. I certainly agree with the comments that were made about the work back to staff of some of the requests made associated with this on tracking things and checking with other agencies and everything. I would really question whether there's any net benefit of us moving forward with this with any further staff time absorbed into this at all. So again, I am opposed to this.
And I also want to get a reminder from Mark. What was the estimate that our third-party advertiser thought that we would generate?
About 200,000 extra per year.
Yeah, so we significantly have undershot what the board made their original decision on, but certainly it could.
Right, it could get up. It's a new policy. It's new to that beverage category. So I think, you know, there is room for it to grow. I mean, I see the revenue that we've collected more as a floor than a ceiling on this. But it is something where it could be in the, you know, low to mid six figures. We just don't know at this point.
Okay. Director Dillard.
Yeah, I see it the same way. I see it that this is new. You know, advertisers haven't had a chance to, you know, catch on and maybe take advantage of the opportunity. You know, we just started with this. So usually when you start something new, it takes time for it to grow. And I wouldn't want to squash it, you know, first time out. You know, how long has it been since we started this program?
Well, it really started to get off the ground probably about 9 months after the board approved the policy, because we had just missed the advertising cycle when they can go out and, you know, actually set their budgets for the year.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been approximately, you know, 16, 18 months. It took us a little while to get that MOU passed with the city of San Diego for the shelters and benches as well. So yeah, I would say 16 months.
Yeah, and when it comes to the getting into companies' budgets, that takes time as well, because everybody has a different cycle. You know, not everyone keeps the same cycle. So we need to, you know, that's how ads work, to be honest with you. You have to be able to get into their budget, and sometimes you miss it completely because you started after their budget cycle. And so we have to keep pushing to make sure that we have a chance to do that. And you know, that's, you know, a year to a year and a half is just the beginning, in my opinion. You know, given that I have a sales background in selling advertisement for our publication, and it took a while to get into the budgets. But once you do, they usually keep you in. And I think that we need to continue to see that for a while before we can really accurately judge whether it's going to be to our advantage.
Thank you, Director Dillard. Is there any further discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, I'll read the motion one more time and then we'll vote. We've got a motion by Director Bush, a second by Vice Chair Goebel to approve the staff recommendation and direct staff to return to the board as soon as possible with information on how best to evaluate the potential disproportionate impacts of alcohol advertising, including a consultation with the San Diego County Department of Health and Human Services. Clerk, please take the vote.
Members, please make your selections on your tablets. Chair, the motion passes with 9 members voting yes and 4 members voting no.
Thank you. That concludes the discussion items that we have for today. Item 28 is for board member or CEO communications, and we're going to begin with Director Leyva Gonzalez.
Thank you much. Thank you very much, Chair. I sit here as a representative from my city, Imperial Beach, and previously there were issues when the Rapid 227 bus first came out. I'm the voice of all the residents in my city, and recently, just within the past month, MTS has begun construction on 4 bus stop shelters, one at Dahlia and Seacoast, one at Pier Plaza, one that's going to go in front of City Hall, and then additional on 13th and IB Boulevard. During that process, it's clear that MTS did not do quite enough outreach to some of the small businesses, because I've received a lot of negative feedback in regards to why are these construction sites starting right at the beginning of summer. So in my daily job, individuals are always not pleased with the discomfort of a construction site during the process, the beginning, the process, but upon it being completed cosmetically afterwards, everybody's, positive and the end result. So there's just a few small businesses at one particular stop that, because of the temp fence and things of that nature, it prevented them from visibility of people driving down the street. Our staff, in communication with Beverly, she's phenomenal. Like she is just, her communication with our staff, we've kind of worked through some of those issues. I just personally ask that MTS provides a little more outreach to the businesses that are being negatively affected, because we have a lot of issues with our businesses because of the water quality issue. So primarily during the summertime, everybody from the South Bay wants to come to our coastal utopia to visit Imperial Beach. You can't go on the water, but there's plenty of awesome places to hang out, eat, have drinks. So if MTS can just do more outreach to the small businesses, it's primarily at that one stop at Dahlia and Seacoast, because the stop over at Pier Plaza, which is right across from the Brigantine, that is pretty close to being complete. And then the other 2 locations, you won't have any feedback, because 13th and IB Boulevard is just, there's a donut shop there, and then La Posta Market, and then you won't get any complaints at City Hall. So that's my insight as the representative from my city. Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Director Leyva Gonzalez. Any further board communications? Seeing none, we have 2 closed session. We have 2 closed session items this morning, conference with labor negotiators and a public employee performance evaluation. Clerk, do we have any public comment on the closed session items?
We have no public comments, Chair.
Okay, with that, the board's next meeting is on July 17th at 9 o'clock in the morning. We will now move into closed session.
Just let me know when. Okay. Reporting out of closed session, agenda item number. Hold on. Number 32, sorry. Conference with labor negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6 regarding a collective bargaining agreement between San Diego Trolley and the IBEW Local 465 representing construction safety flag people. The board ratified a tentative agreement that had been reached on May 16th and ratified by the IBEW membership on May 28th by a vote of 10 members in favor and 5 members absent. The members in favor were Dillard, Fleming, Elo Rivera, Foster, Goebel, Koval, McCann, Montgomery Stepp, Moreno, and Whitburn. That members absent were Bush, Voss, Mendoza, Fernandez, and Leipa Gonzalez. As to item number 33, closed session conference, public employee evaluation and conference with labor negotiators related to the CEO, that item was deferred to the July 17th board meeting.
Our meeting has adjourned at 11:42.